Um, okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. This is the second meeting that we've had since Susie and I have taken over the Small Practices Network co-chair position from Kristen, who's joined us, and Christina Marsh. Um, so we are hoping to do half as good a job as they did. Thank you for those of you that came out last month for the in-person meeting. Going forward, we're going to have a mix of kind of in-person and hybrid, or sorry, kind of a hybrid approach of in-person and Zoom meetings. I would encourage those of you who haven't joined the LinkedIn group to do that. We're going to share information there. We're working on some other things behind the scenes in terms of communication between meetings, but we posted a survey there. So if you have any ideas for people you'd like to hear from, types of meetings you'd like to have, we'd love to hear that kind of information from you. I'm going to introduce Bob in a moment. I wanted Susie to be able to introduce herself by her own words. And I will just say that I've been part of the group for about, I guess, 3 or 4 years. I have my own small practice named Primary Projects, and I teach at Northeastern.
Hi, I'm Susie Sanchez, and I just went out on my own about 3.5 years ago, and my firm's name is UX Architecture Studio. I do want to plug something we just created, which was a Facebook group. As part of our survey was what's a good way to sort of communicate. And I'm the only member at the moment. It's called BSA Small Practices Network. The idea of it is to have, so I live in Arlington, and there's an Arlington list, and people always go on and like, hey, do you have a roofer that anyone could recommend? So it's kind of that idea is like, do you have a surveyor? What would you do about this? So kind of a back and forth advice kind of thing for this small group. Just somewhere where, when you work in a larger practice, you can kind of turn to the person next to you and ask a question. So it's kind of trying to create that kind of sharing of knowledge and information. So it's called BSA Small Practices Network. If you search for it and ask to be admitted, I'll let you in.
And to that point, we're trying to decide if we keep the LinkedIn group or not. I don't know, we're not trying to be confusing here. There just hasn't been a ton of interest seemingly in the LinkedIn group. So anyway, we're just kind of trying it out. So again, like, let us know. You can also email the two of us. We can put our email addresses in the chat. Also, you can find our contact info on the BSA's website in the knowledge community section. Okay, so Bob. Bob, as many of you know, founder of Design Lab, previously had stints at Ambeja. I think it's actually more than a stint at Schwartz Silver, 15 years.
16.
16, okay, who's counting? And Machado Silvetti before that. Bob has way too many accomplishments to mention. I think that would kind of take up the rest of our time together. But we are so thankful to have Bob join us today. So I'm going to let you take it away. How's your laptop doing? Would it be better for me to share your presentation from my screen, or do you want to run it through yours, Bob?
I guess if you let me share the screen,
Yeah.
that should work.
I think you should be able to. I just changed a setting. Let me know.
Let me. Can you see my screen? No.
I'm not able to.
Okay, just a second. I'm looking here. Give me just a second here.
Sure.
Okay. So all I need to do is click the share the screen icon.
Yeah, it should be, you press that and then it should give you probably a few options.
Okay,
like share your
great.
whole screen
Got it.
or, a window.
Okay.
There we go. Yes, we can see that.
Okay, and then let me just go to full screen here. Okay, can everyone see that okay?
That looks great.
Okay, have to bear with me. I'm not as technologically adept as any of you who are watching this. So a little background. As Kyle said, I founded Design Lab now 16 years ago. We're in our 16th year. And in many ways, most days, it still feels like a startup. I have been working together with my four partners, Kelly, Marianne, Sam, and Ben, for 14 years. They began with me as interns, and they are now owners in the firm. And I'm happy to announce that this year we transitioned the practice to a women certified firm. So Kelly and Marianne have a slight majority ownership, which was a goal that we had, I think, really from the start. So just by raise of hand, how many of you have started your own practice? I'd say the majority of you. And how many have been with it less than 5 years? More than 5 years? Okay, great. Well, hopefully what I'm going to share will be useful, but again, I'll spend about 20 minutes here, and I'd like to devote the rest of the time to discussion. So first, an apology. What you see on the screen is a presentation that I prepared as a request for the annual Ohio AIA meeting convention over 8 years ago, which was specifically focused on young architects. It was hosted at Kent State University with a desire at that time, following the 2010 market crash, a focus on practice. So it was valuable to share with them. And I think somehow now, as we are maybe at the verge of the next recession, all of this seems somehow relevant again. So let me see here. Just having trouble here advancing my slides. Let me see. Oh, here we go. So we launched the firm in 2005 with the idea of creating a new kind of practice model, understanding already at that time that the way we practice architecture had to shift. I was in a number of larger Boston firms which had a significantly high overhead. So we launched to be more nimble, everybody doing everything. So nobody was more shocked than we were in May of 2010 when Architect Magazine had their third listing of the top 50, and we found ourselves on the cover because throughout the market crash and the recession, we actually had very robust and profitable years. We were able to retain everyone and pay people at their salary rates. Now, it wasn't because our business model was so brilliant. We had the good fortune of having two large projects, one for UMass Dartmouth and one for the University of Maine, which never got canceled because they were funded by the Obama package. So here's a kind of snapshot of the various recessions. Because I'm old enough, practicing now 40 years, I'm about to enjoy my fourth recession or challenge. The first big one was in '75. You can see the gray bars indicate the recessions. There was a smaller one in '81 that had to do with the kind of tech crash, but '90 was really devastating. I was working at Schwartz Silver at the time. We were down from 25 to 8, on 30% salary and counting the days until we went out of business. we had 2 competitions as an opportunity, and we literally had to win both to survive. And somehow, remarkably, we did. So in 2009, the whole thing happened again. In 1990 and 2009, the unemployment rate for architects in Boston was 50%. So it was pretty devastating. So I'm sorry, I went too quickly on my slides. So I was at Kent State making this presentation with great young architects there looking to what their future might be. And the truth is, what we know from Northeastern, who shifted their architecture program from the Arts and Sciences division to the College of Arts, Media, and Design, I think for logical reasons. A lot of architects end up practicing in different professions. And in fact, Northeastern some years ago was talking about creating a distinct degree in creative thinking and problem solving within the architecture department, which might prepare their students for other career choices. And the truth is, even today, many of the students go on from architecture to other careers. So the 2009 crash was pretty monumental, and many architects, young architects, didn't see a strong future and began to think about other careers. There's a famous story, many of them were selling coffee at Starbucks or even starting their own coffee businesses, not knowing what the future would hold. And I like to share a story from that period. This actually goes back to the 1990 crash. I was at Schwartz Silver, and as we got going again, a talented young graduate from MIT School of Architecture who had an undergraduate degree in environmental science was our first hire, Scott. And he came to my desk one day and he said, well, my classmate, John, who was in the same program, just wanted to send his regards. He came in to talk to you in 1990 about a career in architecture. And at that time, I was very cynical, thinking we were going to go out of business. This is a tough profession. And I said to him, well, why would you want to become an architect? You could pursue one of the allied careers. At the time, we were doing museums and theaters. I said, be a set designer, be an exhibit designer. They get 25% fees on their work. We're working at 7 to 9%, and we have to do, energy code, accessibility, roofing and window details. It's a better career. So apparently John went to California, took my advice at heart, and became a set designer for a sitcom. So he was working only 8 months out of the year, doing 6 sets and making $100,000. And he said, and all his friends who were in architecture were working 50 hours a week, making $35,000. So he really appreciated my advice. Having said that, I think architecture is an incredibly rewarding profession, and it has great impact. But again, the truth is probably 50% of architecture school graduates go on to other fields. I'm not here encouraging you to make that shift. I'm just trying to frame the background. So one of the most notable was Evan Sharp, who was a student at Columbia, architecture student at Columbia, and he and his friends, like so many of us in design school, would pin up our precedents on a board and look at influences while we were doing our design. He had this brilliant idea, well, I could do a website that allows posting of favorite precedents and examples, which became Pinterest, and he and his partners are billionaires. So it's interesting. So I borrowed here some data that was very relevant back in one of the previous recessions, and it's called the practice spectrum. And this is information that I didn't develop, but many advisors to architectural practice were framing things in this way. And basically, at that time, firms were pretty much defined by their structure and their mission and the kind of work they're doing. So on the far left of this practice spectrum were, at the time, and this is going back some years now, there were the artists, the articians, most of those academic who were doing experimental work. And that was Rem Koolhaas and Diller Scofidio and folks like that. On the far right were the kind of A&E firms, service providers who had a very integrated system for project delivery, doing big projects, a lot of them things like prisons, healthcare, that kind of thing. In the middle, we had something called market diversified leaders, and those were firms either doing commercial real estate or institutional work that had certain project typologies. It's typical of many firms in Boston. And then, others in between. There's in category 2, there's a recognized design leaders, and those are practices that were really built under the identity of a single kind of design star, if you will. So along with the structure of those practice are the goals. So, in the far left, we had the aspiration of inventing new models, working behind the boundaries of building alone, focusing on content. Today, we would add to that, enhancing community, designing for resilience, all of that. At the far right, with those kind of large corporate firms, the real primary goal was profit. So how can you deliver these projects in the most efficient manner? And then, to the right of the advancement of culture and community is design achievement. And a lot of firms were really interested in advancing the formal language of their projects and a certain approach to theory and creating a kind of signature of work. And from that, in the middle, we have the strong identity practices. So what happened after the big recession, all these firms kind of morphed and began to behave like each other. So Rem Koolhaas and Diller Scofidio, they secured big projects. Most notably, their first big project was the ICA in Boston. So they had to set up and behave more like a market diversified leader. And the service practitioners, which were typically A&E firms, saw the value of design and started to promote themselves as designers. So all of this kind of crosses practice spectrum. So again, Diller Scofidio now is a very strong practitioner doing leading projects throughout the US. Their first kind of built project back in 2002 was this fog building. So it leads us to the public perception of what architects are, what they understand architects to be. So if you've never watched it, the 50s movie, The Fountainhead, is pretty interesting. It's based on Ayn Rand's book, which is supposed to be about Frank Lloyd Wright, but it's this hero genius architect who will do anything to realize his vision. And indeed, we had, and I think this is evolving, many practitioners that fulfilled that model. In the Architect 50 ratings, Raphael Vignoli was number 4, but credited with being the most profitable practicing architect. in America. And that's in large part because he's an autocratic leader. I knew him well in the day because he was an instructor of mine first time he taught at GSD many years ago. So a very driven personality. But the reality is, we know with the complexity of projects and society and how we deliver them, most firms have become a collaborative practice, and design authorship is not an important issue, or something that is credited to a single personality. I mean, we saw that already emerging with firms like these. Todd Williams and Billy Chen were fortunate in that their whole practice, the whole collaborative team, were recognized as an AIA Firm Award winner. I think this was back in 2010, but it was their acknowledgement in part of the firm evolving to something where all the members of the team on their projects were significant contributors to the programming, the concept, the design, the execution of these things, not just Todd and Billy. So how we practice, it's important to understand the basic diagram of this, and it's a little bit superficial, but the hierarchical model is one that's well known in the large corporate firms, particularly A&E firms, where out of necessity and for efficiency, project teams are kind of divided into two sections. There's the design leader or the principal or owner. There's a project manager running the whole ship. And on the left side is a lead project designer in the design team. This is where intern architects would complain, I've spent 2 years drawing nothing but bathroom elevations. Then on the right-hand side is the job captain, the technical team that then developed the design into working drawings and take it through execution. And often those were two different worlds with a complete handoff between. And it's fair to say there are many larger firms, some in Boston, I won't mention here, that still fundamentally operate in this diagram. So at Design Lab, at the launch, we saw the value of everybody sitting at the same big, long desk, no offices, and working together on each project. You know, it might be a student, intern student from Northeastern, one of our more senior technical architects, myself as design leader, but really an art director, not the primary author, and a whole mix of talent from the very start, engaged with the client and following the project all the way through. And a lot of that comes out of the kind of work that I had been doing and the firm has done, fortunately. And that's where other allied designers, such as theater designers, exhibit designers, landscape architects, definitely, even structural engineers, might have a significant input into the very early stages of the project and the design of it. So this isn't a new invention. There were practices, you know, in the early or mid 20th century that were working in that way. I think most notably Saarinen, who had quite a number of designers, and also he was working with allied designers, graphic designers, interior designers, and all of that. And probably the most important model of that collaborative practice at the time, early 60s, was the Architects Collaborative, which was started by a bunch of 20-year-olds out of the Harvard GSD, and they began to secure projects, and they realized soon that they needed a senior advisor or mentor. So they actually brought Gropius in later to help with their early model and their early success. Gropius didn't actually start the Architects Collaborative, but joined that idea of the firm. And they were very successful for many years in that model. So I'll share with you also some borrowed research called emerging practices. So after the 2009-2010 crash, folks started to look for opportunities or openings in the profession to practice in a different way. On the far left, we have some financial models. Firms like Flank and Shop, who were doing work for developers, decided, well, we could initiate our own developments and do just as good a job and control our future in that way. There were firms that specialized on certain aspects of practice, which in some cases was sustainability or fabrication of parts. And then there were firms that saw the opportunity to create kind of new services, not typically provided by most architectural firms. I think most notable was UTIL. They understood that there was a gap there in terms of having creative thinking applied to real estate development and understanding the rules and requirements of getting those projects developed. And then Michael Murphy, who you all are familiar with, claims that he was unable to get a job at that time. So he saw the opportunity through some of Boston's philanthropic health organizations to create a nonprofit firm that would serve some of their mission in underserved countries. And that has become an extraordinary model. So here's the folks at Flank. They not only developed their own architectural projects, but their own development, did their own development along with their ongoing practice, and actually offered brokerage for the purchase of loft firms. Here's a young Tim Love at the launch of UTIL many years ago. And I like this statement: UTIL is a design firm built like a think tank. So they figured out very smartly how to get to some of these development strategies and opportunities in a new and different way than what was being provided to the real estate industry at the time. And I think a strong part of that was their graphics and communication, which explained how these strategies, achieving maximum FAR and all of that, might work. And then, of course, Mass Design. It's great that they were acknowledged this year as AIA Firm Award. So they're actually designing and building projects in Africa, in the Caribbean, with partners on the ground there, which is a pretty incredible evolution of the early idea of that firm. So for any of you who have just started a practice or thinking about it, or midway along in that, I think it's important that you're very clear about your mission, your belief, and your philosophy. For Design Lab, that was easy because I launched a firm with colleagues that were already in the same framework. So we didn't have to spend much time sorting that out. And then once you know what your missions are, you need to establish some simple goals, and then that provides a recipe for success. So in the Design Lab model, and again, this was just before the recession of 2009-2010, I already understood from my past experience over, at that time, about 30 years working in larger practices, that we had to have a more efficient and better practice model. We were just at that time adopting technology, we actually began with a 3D system that was popular in Europe called ArchiCAD, and only recently switched to Revit. But I had this theory that architects are really smart, they're versatile, they're nimble. They can do a lot of things that some firms have full-time overhead staff doing. So I had this crazy idea of assigning all these operational things to my young architects, knowing that they would do them quickly and efficiently, just to get them out of the way so they wouldn't have to waste all their time doing that and could stay focused on what they were really interested in. But the goal there was actually to provide more services for the same fee to our client, and to roll in some research and to look at their problems in different ways, and to support some of their other needs, whether or not we could charge for those activities. So we have been in the Fort Point channel ever since our inception. We're fortunate to have inherited Jane Thompson's space. We were a tenant of hers, and she passed away, I think, 2.5 years ago. And we're actually in the space now on Channel Center Street that she originally occupied, renting from her heirs. I sometimes would say to our staff, you have to understand, we're not an architectural firm, we're a full-time business development and marketing firm. And that's what we have to do continuously. And sometimes we're lucky, we get commissions and we design and build buildings. So everybody in our firm is involved with communications, marketing, supporting that effort. At the core of our practice, like most firms, is planning, concept design, research, which translates into building projects. But we have all these bubbles in here, like technology, finance, contracts, reception. We've never had a receptionist. Why would you need a receptionist? Anybody can answer the phone, right? Office equipment stuff. So we would assign all these activities to one of our staffers. I typically managed all the finance issues. We had a lawyer for 1 year, spent $35,000, and figured out that just wasn't needed. So in our 15 years since then, we've never had a line item for a lawyer. Our insurer does do review of our contracts, so it's $35,000 a year that I distribute to my staff in bonuses. So our mission is, we really see the opportunity with each of our architectural commissions to advance the mission and identity of educational and cultural institutions, to really understand their needs, and to use the planning and design of their building projects to reach the communities they serve culturally, educationally, but also economically. So early on, we get really into the heads of our clients and become part of their organization. And one of our clients said, you know, you guys are actually cultural psychologists. I don't know if that was a positive comment or not, but a great model of working that way is Sam Mockapy and the Rural Studio. We've had a number of employees who participated in the Rural Studio, but to get into a community, really understand their needs, work directly with them to find a result, even when the projects are grossly underfunded, I think is a remarkable thing. And that's what really fuels us in our practice. And we've been fortunate to have great clients. My partner, Sam Batchelor, began a design build program at Mass College of Art, which he ran for 8 years. And he was founder at the BSA of the Community Design Resource Center, but all of that plays into our current work. So I had 2 case studies in here from the Kent State presentation, and I'm not going to go into detail about our work. I'll just scroll through these. I think many of you are familiar with it, but we did launch with an extraordinary opportunity to design a new headquarters for the International Fund for Animal Welfare, which is a worldwide organization. It's on Cape Cod. It had a number of challenges. One, they had a false start on planning a new building, and they tried to rent a building. So they came to us with the goal of building a new building that costs no more than what an existing building on the Cape would cost to rent. And then it turns out that the site, let me scroll up here, that they selected was a major brownfield site. So we had to go through a whole cleanup within that budget. But it was a great project, very economically built. They wanted a great identity, and the identity was really formed by creating the building around a restored landscape. So we completely restored the landscape with Stephen Stimson landscape architects, complete with creating a kind of drumlin form, which we believe once existed on the site before it was stripped off. And this helped to launch our firm because it received national recognition. We won a Code Award, a AIA National Award, and all of that. And it was helpful to build a practice around that. Then completely different kind of project was our renovation of Rudolph's building at UMass Dartmouth. You see Rudolph here with his pointer. He designed and built 1 million square feet between 1965 and 75 as a whole new campus, Dartmouth, Mass, on a farm site. Campus of lounge pits. So this was not a beloved campus and building. So our goal was to completely reassess and reinvent that architecture. And it has created virtually a new identity for the school by leveraging that work. And here, this was the gateway entry under this kind of what looks like a parking garage from the west, and this is it as it was transformed. So again, the design lab practice model, just in summary here, our goal is achieving the client's missions and goals, and we're doing a lot of things to do that. Sometimes planning and feasibility, sometimes economic analysis. We're often offering additional kinds of services, definitely helping with fundraising. We are just completing the restoration of the oldest campus building at Dartmouth College, Dartmouth Hall, and woven throughout the replanning of the interior is a whole exhibit strategy chronicling the impact of the women of Dartmouth, which we developed, conceptually designed, and are installing in the building. It's going to be a huge enhancement to the architecture. So just a little bit of business 101. You know, the many articles from Architectural Record, why should you or should you not start your practice? Susie, I think you're on the right track. Stick with it. But a few rules of thumb, and these are a little out of date because they're from my older presentation, but this says gross billings, but basically all the metrics would say in net billings, that's billings with the consultant fees backed out, you probably need today about 150,000 per employee, which in a firm of 10 would translate to 1.5 million. We're a little over 15 folks right now, and we're at that metric, which puts us over 3 million in net billings. So that's a good starting point, just to understand what your target should be. And basically, if you have that much income, despite some inefficiencies in how you deliver the work, it could pretty much ensure a successful practice. Another metric that comes from all the analysts and accountants and such is that the ratio of direct billable hours to overhead hours should be for the firm overall 65% billable. Now, that's a pretty high target, because you have to understand that you can never achieve more than about 75%, because you have sick days, vacation, holidays, all of that. In our firm, we always achieve that, in large part because all of the principals, including myself, were billable most of the time. And that's because they had a direct role in the projects. We're probably one of the few firms I know where all of our major projects have a principal that's directing it through construction. That means that every construction meeting, which is rare and unusual, but obviously it really helps in the success of the project and the client's satisfaction. And then this is another kind of accountant metric called a break-even multiplier. So most firms, it talks about your kind of overhead factor compared to your overall operation. So most firms in Boston are probably operating at about 3.0. We have always been between 2.0 and 2.4, which means our overhead rate is about 20 to 25% less than all our peers. So what that translates into directly is profit on net billings. So our profession did well in the recent years, and most firms were operating at 50% profit on net billing. We have always targeted and set up every project to operate at 20 to 25% profit on net billings, and we've achieved that throughout. We have had some years where we had 35% profit on net billings, and that's without compromise to delivering our services. And in those years, all of our employees got 10 to 15% bonuses on salary because it's important to keep everybody invested in those goals. So yeah, why is money important? And it's not our primary goal. It's probably our third or fourth goal in the firm. Fourth, I would say. It's important to reward yourself, to help build a practice, to recruit the best, and to fund research and marketing. Business development, I'm sure it's on all your minds, developing leads. And I think you all know a lot about this. I mean, there's research and responding to RFPs, but more effective thing is to be out there making introductions to clients you want to work with. Partnering and coattailing is really critical. We receive a lot of our leads and opportunities through our contractor friends or our landscape or our planning firm friends. Finding patrons that will be repeat clients is great. Having breakthrough projects, which you can really leverage, is great. And then, all the techniques of promoting your firm, not through ads, but general interest stories, all the online publications, all of that. Conferences are important to us. We probably present at 14 different conferences every year, not just AIA, but museum conferences, Society of College University planners, all of that. So I'll leave you with this. These are my Bob's five ingredients to win a project. First of all, I mean, the typical thing is you need experience with the project type. And even though we have a pretty built up portfolio of experience, there's always somebody on the short list with far more experience than we have. So it's packaging your experience to be more specific to what this client is looking for. And part of that might be differentiating yourself by redefining their problem. They may be asking for a certain amount of square footage, but if you look at what they might really need or what they could really do with a project and framing that for them, that could be a deciding difference. I always believe you need an advocate on the selection committee, and sometimes for us, that comes already. But if not, through the walkthroughs and the communications and all that, it's important to connect with one or more committee members who you can make an advocate for your firm. And then we invest an enormous amount of time, as I'm sure many of you do, preparing the interview to make it really interactive and effective and create excitement. And early on, we'd often come in second, and the committee would say, well, you were definitely the most entertaining firm we interviewed, but we selected somebody else. So luck is always a factor. So that's basically my presentation. I apologize if I ran a little long here, but I have as much time to spend with you all as you would like.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Bob. I wanted to, we prepared some questions, but I wanted to maybe open it up to the group and see. We just did that because we thought people might be shy on the meeting. So if anybody wants to get out there with a question, please do. I'll just pause for a second.
Yeah, anything is fair game.
So Bob, my name is Khalil Pirani. I haven't established a firm, but I've been just thinking about it. So Bob, on the 2.2 or 2.4 multiplier, were you just able to survive because of your low overheads? Is that what the trick is?
Yeah. We basically now 16 years have only had one non-technical staff, non-architect, and that has been our marketing coordinator. And we have a fabulous one right now. She's only 26 years old, and she's the best I've ever worked with. So basically, we're in a firm our size, we've been able to manage all the other things that are necessary, like HR, financial. We do outsource to our accounting firm for a bookkeeper that's typically in our office only 1 or 2 days a week. But that just allows more hours for all of us to do our work. So I'm a big proponent of that. Now, having said that, there is a threshold, and we pretty much reached it a few years ago when we had the good fortune of so many large projects. We were up to 25, where we couldn't, it was clear we weren't going to be able to continue to operate in that model without more full-time assistance. But we're back down around 15, 18, and it still seems to be working well. We typically have an intern that's helping out in a number of things, marketing and communications, as well as sometimes architecture. I think we've employed probably 15 Northeastern interns over the years.
Because I've noticed with CAD and Revit, I think you can pump up a set pretty quickly with much less manpower than we used to do 20 years ago.
Yes.
So that's another big plus.
Yeah, and in the firms I was in back at the time, we might have 2 or 3 people full-time managing the technology, with a crash every week. And what I was learning is our architects were solving the crash problem, not the tech support. So it's like, okay, I think they're better at it. Yeah. We do have a tech consultant that comes in maybe every other month to update software and all of that. But we're pretty, probably like all of your firms, we're pretty tech savvy.
Thank you.
Thanks for that
Except for
question,
me.
Khalil. I think, James, did you have your hand up?
Sure, I have about 30 questions, but I'll just say the one that just, and I really appreciate actually the business 101 section. That was incredibly valuable. And it's wonderful to see somebody share actual business information like that. So many times you go to these things and people talk about their projects or their wonderful ideas or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They don't talk about how they actually survive and pay the bills, which is really
Well,
critical.
Well, and I didn't invent any of that. For years, accountants used a software, Harper Schumann, and we had all these elaborate ways of checking the progress on each project, the financial progress. And I came to learn, I mean, we had people from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, whatever, and they weren't getting it. So I said, there's got to be like a stupid, simple way just to track the financial success of the firm. So every project, as we start out, has a budget, and we project it out through all phases with a number of staff assignments, numbers at different rates. So we know through each phase what we can spend, and then you check it along the way. Sometimes you go over, sometimes you're running under, and you have to make adjustments.
Yeah,
But it's pretty rudimentary.
Yeah, we've done it in the past. We're a two-person firm, so the amount of energy we have to spend on making our business profitable is limited. And I think sometimes we set up these systems of managing and checking and verifying, et cetera. We just don't have time to do it. So it's, we kind of ride that wave a little bit, but we're trying to ramp up.
Not to interrupt, but let me make one suggestion. And I did this in a larger, very powerful and successful firm, and it never occurred to him. So you take money out of your paycheck every week to fund your 401k. My philosophy is we get a project, we take the profit out up front, and we, conceptually, and park it aside, and we never touch that. So you can fund your profit, and if you hold to that discipline, because you're doing it for your 401k, it's different order of magnitude, you can simply be profitable. You can fund your profit.
Yeah, I'll talk to my family about that and see how they feel about it. But anyway, I think they would feel good about it if they were able to, I mean, it's like we all have this issue of, once your business is successful, you can do stuff like that. If you're in the mode of struggling to get by, it's tough. So I guess the one thing that I would ask, so many questions, but one would be, I recently read an article about business practice and sort of changing your mindset that was written in a Journal of Light Construction, which I love that magazine. But the guy was saying that, one of the things small firms get into is this kind of catastrophizing mode, where they feel like if they don't capture 9 out of 10 of the projects they go after, they're never going to get another project. He was saying that a successful firm should target maybe 30% at most of the projects they go after. In other words, you really only want to capture the projects that are a good fit and really profitable for you. And how do you feel about that? What's your approach?
No, it's absolutely true. But one thing I will share with you, we've been remarkably successful and very lucky, but only 2 years. We came into the pandemic in good shape because we had 4 substantial projects. I figured 3 would get canceled. None of them did. So we worked with 20 people online. But then the year following, because there were no RFPs, we virtually had no work. So, after 16 years, what you learn is the need to go out and develop leads and secure work. It never stops. It never gets easy. You have some good years and then some thin years, but it's just a continuous challenge I think for all firms like us, small business practices. I know very few firms where it just rolls in over the transom. It's
Right,
always an effort, and that's tough for especially for my younger colleagues. You know, you get to a point where you're really successful at it, but then oh, here we go again. We're out there chasing down opportunities. We can't fill out the workload, all of that.
Mhm.
It's just the reality of what we do.
Can I ask why I don't want to monopolize?
I'm sorry.
I don't want to monopolize, but if I
No,
can ask
oh.
one more.
But if somebody else has a question that they've been waiting to ask, jump in.
Good to see some folks I know
Okay.
here,
Maybe
Kristen and
hold
David.
that
And
thought, James, and Eve can hop in with your question.
Did you say that I could hop in with my question? Okay.
Yes.
I just did it. I also appreciate your business 101 section of your presentation very much. And I understand that you guys were working on different projects. My firm is a 6-person firm working mostly in residential, like commercial work. But $150,000 of billings per employee, when we're billing our mid-range employees out at $90 an hour, which means that they would have to be working 50 hours a week.
okay, so it needs to
feel
be
like-
higher. Yeah.
I maybe I'm doing something wrong. We're just at this point where we're just a little bit too big to be running our business on spreadsheets and Google Sheets and things, and we're thrashing around looking for software for people to help record timesheets and stuff like that, because it's getting hard to manage with 25 projects and 6 people putting in their time. And so I realized that your firm was much bigger, but could you tell me how you kept track of your time?
Well,
That's my question.
yeah. So I'm not the best person to give you that advice, but you could reach out to my colleagues. Do you know Kelly Haig? She would be happy to give you advice. She was chair of Women in Design at DSA. But a critical piece of it is we have an overall office budget. And we have the history of what all our costs are, rent, overhead, machines, all that. And we plug in all the fees on top, and then it comes down to a bottom line. So every month we're looking at that. Now, it's been an invaluable tool, but it's been a struggle all along the way because it's basically an accrual budget, and our accountants only ever want to look at it as cash. For whatever reason, we have never, ever had a cash flow problem. We have good clients. They pay timely. So we rarely need to borrow cash. So what we actually do is we have the accrual budget, and then each month when it's kind of closed out, the accountant converts that month to the cash base. So it's a little bit crazy, but it works. So that's one tool we use. And then in terms of entering time and all that, we're using some updated technology all through, our Google Drive. We converted maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, everything over to Google. So they're using all those templates. So my colleagues would be happy to share with you what we're using. You could also reach out to Sam or Kelly. Sam may be actually better. So
I know the Google products, so that's actually super helpful, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. But we kind of devised our own method, and again, it was to keep it kind of simple and stupid so everybody could follow it. We don't need an accountant or even a bookkeeper to translate the information for us.
I was just gonna say, Eve, a few people have put things in the chat too, if you want to see
Oh, okay.
what others have suggested.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't check the chat.
Oh, no, that's all right.
Oh, okay. They've suggested some. Okay, so
The maps, yeah. No questions there yet.
well, okay, good, excellent.
All right, James, you want to jump back in?
So how are you all doing? Are you nervous about the future? Or are you feeling pretty good about where you are now?
I was excited until you started talking about the next recession.
Sorry.
So
It's just,
I've been around for long enough to live through a few of those myself. And you know,
well, it hasn't seemed to have any impact yet.
well, I have a question about that actually, which is related to another question, so that I can combine them, which is that one thing I learned from my dad, who had an architecture and planning firm, was that being diversified, being able to do more than one thing, was a good way to ride out recessions. So they would be doing planning when it was a recession, they'd be doing architecture, when it wasn't a recession. I kind of adopted something similar where I do consulting work in sustainable consulting, lead and stuff like that. And then I also do architecture and design work. And so I've kind of had this similar balance where I did a lot more of the lead work during the recession, and sort of it seems to have helped me float through.
That's a good model. And from some of that consulting work, it ultimately, I'm sure, will lead to projects, actual building projects.
Not so much, because the consulting work I do is on 50 to 150, $200 million projects.
Okay.
And I'm a two-person firm, so it doesn't really translate.
Okay.
But I guess the thing that I was going to ask is, you mentioned a lot of diversity in the services you offer. And, what percentage of your billing, what percentage of your fee goes from, things like graphic design or, strategy?
That's a very good question. And I should know that. I think in a really good year, it might be as much as 25 or 30% of our total billings. We have gotten into a pattern recently, and this was a big goal of mine from the start, to do more exhibit design, and it goes hand in hand. We're working for a number of museums right now, so it was pretty easy to pick up that work. And then we have consultants that work with us on the kind of exhibit planning side, but we're doing all the execution in terms of the documents and all that, because in many cases that was a necessity for the kind of exhibit designers we were working with. But then we do a lot of planning, like most firms, feasibility planning and site selection planning and programming, in-depth programming efforts for a lot of these institutions, which is good. It's something I enjoy doing a lot. It's like planting the seeds for hopefully a more substantial project to come down the road out of that work.
But is that work, do you consider it part of your profit engine? I mean, as opposed to...
No, we can do that work incredibly efficiently. One of the kind of craziest projects, for those of you who know Northeastern, we were doing the Curry Center refresh, basically an interior project. And for years, nobody could figure out how to direct students and faculty through the tunnels. And they had various graphic designers working on this and all that. So they took us on to completely rethink what a wayfinding program would be like for the tunnels, a challenging assignment. And so it became an in-depth research project. We went and looked at European models, and created all kind of different devices to do this. And it was amazingly successful. And those projects are pretty profitable because even though there's a lot of design thinking and presentations, the end deliverables aren't that demanding, to set up some graphic templates. It's basically what we do for required code signage on most of our projects anyway, right? So I think that kind of work can be reasonably profitable. One simple metric is the bigger the project is, the more likely it is to produce a good profit. You may be putting the same amount of hours in a $4.5 million project as a $15 million project. So we do part of our model is we've always had one or two large projects sustaining the practice, which allow us to do smaller projects, fill in with smaller projects, which we like to do. But that's a reality. You know, we used to say we need a $10 to $15 million project. Nowadays, they're more likely, given similar size and square footage, 25 to 30 million. Just the way construction costs are. But we can do that well in a firm of only 15, where typically those are commissions for 100 person firms, and we compete pretty successfully against the larger firms for those kind of projects. And that's an advantage of any of your firms. You can dedicate the personal time of the leaders of the firm, and I think that's a real asset. I mean, unfortunately, not every client looks at that. They look at the whole long portfolio of work, but like, are any of the people that did these projects still even in your firm, right?
Well, we've had a tough time recently, even competing for work that you would think that the big multinationals would have zero interest in, like house doctor work for some suburban town. How suddenly those firms are going after that.
Yeah.
And it's really mystifying to me, but talking to the facilities managers that I work with, they say, well, it's just tough to tell my boss that I'm not going to go with this giant corporation, because they feel like, there's this comfort level with that.
It's a safe choice. Yeah. That's why I think it's really important to connect with somebody in the institution or on the committee to make a personal connection. So at the end of the day, they're hiring people you're going to be really close to for 3 years. So they need to like them, right?
So Bob, on your
Susie,
checklist, I was gonna say, on your checklist of success, that was the one that I stumbled on a little bit, with creating an advocate on the selection committee. How do you do that? And I mean, I worry that it's become sort of a structural barrier to inclusivity, but I'm curious to know how your firm has handled that.
Well, it's different for every project, but in a project where maybe it's a public RFP and or you got sent the RFP, but you don't really have a connection with the team at the institution that's doing it. There's always an opportunity for a walkthrough, or even phone meetings and all of that. There might be the director of facilities. So I think it's typically okay, not always with public clients, to reach out on the walkthrough and ask them questions, ask if you can have a follow-up phone call, just to begin the conversation. And with that conversation, you can learn a lot about what they're really worried about, what their primary concerns are, but they also can get a better feel for you and an understanding, hopefully, that that you would really be attentive to these things. So I'm kind of pretty social, so I have no embarrassment walking up to somebody and just asking a few, hopefully not stupid questions, to engage their interest and get them talking about that. And then it's kind of a step-by-step follow-up. You can send them an email and say, hey, I looked at your RFP and you say you want to do this and you have this program, but have you thought about this? And, could I call you and find out more about this issue? So it's just a way of showing your genuine interest. So you might find on the walkthrough or even the introduction online that there's one or two people that might be open but don't be afraid to do it. All they can do is say, well, no, I can't do that, or I don't want to talk to you. Don't take it as rejection.
Yeah.
But it works.
Good
It
advice.
really works. It works. My previous colleague, who now works for the Boston Redevelopment Authority, who is like one of the most engaging and social personalities I've ever met. He'd call and call and call to try to get a conversation with the director of facilities or whatever. But he would always connect with a person's administrative assistant, become their friend overnight. And invariably, he or she would get them in for a meeting or line up a phone call or whatever. And I said, Scott, you're amazing.
I would just add to that, like from my own experience, I think the key thing there is really making a connection by being a good listener. And I say that from the experience of not always being a good listener myself. And last year I went after a project that I thought I was a shoo-in because I had a really good long-standing relationship with the town facilities director. And I thought it was just going to be another project they were going to give me. And this guy came in to the RFP, which I had actually helped them write in a way that would be more open to inclusivity. And this by reducing some of the structural barriers that you were talking about that are built into a lot of RFPs. So this guy came in from out of the blue that nobody had ever seen before, small firm from the middle of the state. And he just blew me out of the park because he listened really carefully and he addressed what was the real issue, which I wasn't paying attention to at all. And I was thinking it was just about me and my relationship with the town. And he just nailed it and he got the job. And I think it showed for me that you can establish those relationships no matter where you're coming from, no matter what your background, if you really listen to what the needs are of the particular project.
No, I think that's true. And then the other thing that you touched on there, sometimes just redefining the project, and that can be a risk. I have missed the target on occasion, but you look at the whole RFP, you listen to everything they say, everything they're trying to do, and you say, wow, but why aren't they reaching out with this project to do this or accomplish that? And sometimes when you frame it and say, yeah, no, everything you do here is possible, but did you ever think about having thus and such, or connecting with the community in this way with your project? And then a light bulb can go off for the committee and they go, wow, that's really what we should be doing with the project. And it hadn't occurred to us. So it's really brilliant when you can do that. And I think more often than not, it helps if it, even if it doesn't make the critical difference. So
I think I have one kind of final question for you, Bob. I think a lot of us have gotten the message, like from various podcasts we listen to, marketing consultants we've spoken with or hired, that specializing is kind of a route to success. I think obviously in architecture school, I think we're trained as generalists and we get that message. I think many of us like being generalists because we like the diversity of different work types. I think Design Lab, I feel like, and you could correct me on this if you see it differently, but I feel like Design Lab has done a good job of focusing in on kind of educational and institutional work, like writ large. But that, it's incredibly diverse, the kind of projects you've worked on in that spectrum. And so I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you kind of came to that, and two, how consistent you felt like you needed to be with that messaging, if you've kind of taken on projects outside of that realm. Like, so there's a lot of questions in there. You can kind of take whatever's interesting to you.
yeah, so no, I thanks for that observation, because we never intended to have a specific project type focus, partly because we were interested in doing more than that. And we never intended to have a singular architectural style, a style that could be identified with the firm. Because because I believe from the get-go that what's exciting about our work is to be engaged in a completely different place, a different community, a different client, and to understand the history and the legacy of that place, leveraging the site or the building, and inventing something new that really responds to that institution in that place. So that's always been our design ethos. Now, I can appreciate that it's an advantage to be a specialist, but we're probably not the right kind of firm, and most of you aren't to fill that bill. I mean, one of my greatest career regrets, we work for all these colleges and universities, and we don't have any kind of a portfolio in dormitories, and that dormitories is the single biggest category of higher educational work because they have more dormitory buildings than any other kind of buildings. Having said that, we're now doing the largest a dormitory building on Wellesley's campus, the Tower building. And that came solely out of the longtime relationship. I think this is our third or fourth project for Wellesley through my partner, Marianne Upton. I mean, our firm, particularly as a women-owned firm and all of that, is just the right fit for them, and they trust us. So to renovate a dormitory, a big dormitory, which we've never done before, no risk for them. So at the end of the day, you have to do what you really love and what you believe in. You look for opportunity along the way. We never set out to be a national expert, if we are, in mid-century modernism. And I didn't have any particular interest in Rudolph because going to the GSD, he was Yale, he was completely discarded from our kind of focus. But my partner Kelly came to the firm just at that time. She's from the University of Florida, and Rudolph is like a god to Florida architects. So I went all the way to Florida and toured all his early houses, and we got completely wrapped up in the whole Rudolph legacy and all of that. And doing that project, it ended up being one of the most important projects of the firm, and leveraged many other building projects for mid-century modernism or brutalism, whatever you might want to call it. So that kind of came a little bit by accident, but we saw the opportunity in it, and it was great to dive in and enjoy it. Just a short aside, we found Rudolph's key architect for the entire campus, this guy Grattan Gill. He was still living on the Cape. He was in his late 80s, and we engaged him and brought him in. It was like amazing. This guy remembered every part of it. He told stories about the whole thing. It just like, I don't know, lit us up, and it was great. He didn't love everything we did. We'd ask him for his permission on things, and he was no way formally connected to the project, but it was just amazing to find that resource and have it be part of our process.
Well, thank you. It's been great to have you. Really appreciate you being so generous with your time. I think that was more than we could have imagined in terms of.
Well, I apologize. I had this thing. I presented it to BS, a similar version of this at BSA over the years and all that. So I hope it wasn't too out of sync with what you needed to hear about. But I encourage you all to pursue a career in architecture. It's most rewarding. Don't go to California and do sitcoms. It's just, you'll be financially fulfilled, but not emotionally and professionally fulfilled.
and thank all of you for joining us.
Yeah.
It was a great turnout. So we have this meeting monthly. It's always on the third Wednesday at this time.
Thursday.
Oh, sorry, Thursday. Yeah, this lets you know how my week is going. Third Thursday of the month at this time. Yep. So thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah,
Thanks,
and
Bob.
if any of you want to reach out to me over the weeks ahead, have any questions or would like to talk, I'm available. I'd love to do that. Love to support you.
And we'll post his
Hey.
email address in the Facebook group, which is a closed group. So that's an incentive to sign up.
Yeah, the Facebook group is a private group as opposed to
Okay.
LinkedIn
Oh, okay.
group, which is more
Okay.
public.
Yeah. Okay, but Kyle's welcome to share my email to all
Yeah.
of you who attended. Okay,
All right.
good to meet you
Thanks,
all.
Bob.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Cheers.
That was wonderful. Really good.
Bye, everyone.